Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brendan, and I hope all of you guys are having a great day no matter where you are from, because we have another very volatile day in Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been in a very choppy zone. CPI numbers just came out at over 9%, and a New York judge is now freezing assets from Three Arrows Capital. Now, on top of all of this, more than $400 million in BNB has been burned in their quarterly move. So there's a lot to unpack here. Clearly there's a lot happening on the chart, and of course I want to talk about what's happening in that Bitcoin Nasdaq correlation as well. So if that does interest you, make sure you stick around for the entire length of the video, as there will be important information discussed the entire way through. With that being said, let's go ahead and start off on the Bitcoin chart here, and we'll look at what's really exactly happening, because previously, Bitcoin was in a pretty large squeeze from this pennant. We had a falling level of resistance, a rising level of support, and what we saw was a nice little breakout from Bitcoin back up to around $22,500, which was the upper echelons of this overall resistance in this range. Now, if it could have really broken past, say, 23,000, it could have gone on a nice bull run back up to 25, or maybe even closer to 28,000, which is this previous consolidation zone. So what we're now seeing is that Bitcoin is now creating a new consolidation zone below where it previously was. So initially we had our leg down, then consolidation. Now we're seeing another leg down, then more consolidation, and more often than not, these things like to move in sets of three. So if we're zooming out to the bigger picture here, this could be maybe the end of this move down consolidation pattern that we're seeing, or we're getting close to the end of it, in my opinion. Now, the bad thing here is that this pennant didn't see that much of a breakout. Like, price was rising, and we'll add in some moving averages and volume in here as well so we can truly see what's going on. But on this daily time scale, we broke above this as well as the 20-day moving average and immediately started falling off back below. And so now we are back below support. In fact, it actually looks like we are rejecting former resistance and support from this daily candle. Granted, it has not closed yet, so that's something to keep an eye out on. So furthermore, when we're looking at Bitcoin at this level, I want to take a look at the RSI and the MACD, and this might be its own separate video, but these are back into a relatively neutral territory. We are exiting that oversold territory that Bitcoin was in, below 30 on the daily RSI. And the MACD has actually been green here for just a little bit, or at least for the past couple of days. Now the MACD is starting to fall off. I think the really unique stuff that might be its own video is looking at Bitcoin on the weekly time scale and how it's currently interacting with all these different price levels, because we are seeing a third higher swing low on the Bitcoin weekly MACD, which could be a sign that the bears are actually getting weaker every single time that they want to push price down. Of course, the Bitcoin RSI on the weekly time scale is at a very, very interesting zone, because this is one of the same levels that it has seen over the course of the 2014 crash, the 2018 crash, the 2020 crash, and now, of course, the 2022 crash. So this has been a very popular level on the weekly and the monthly chart, and we can see that from just looking at this one right here. So again, a very, very consistent level of where Bitcoin has crashed historically, and I think we need to take a look at this in order to get a more holistic view of what's happening behind the scenes. Now, the CPI numbers, as I discussed earlier, are affecting Bitcoin. They're really affecting everything. And so what ended up happening over here is, after the CPI data was released just really a couple hours ago this morning, everything started tanking. Nasdaq started tanking, Bitcoin started tanking, you name it. Pretty much anything that was a traditional asset or even a non-traditional asset started falling off the charts. So we had prices moving up, CPI was released, prices started rapidly falling down, and now we're seeing a volatile day where we're getting one of these Darth Maul candles, where we're seeing pretty much no move from the open, but a high move to the upside and the downside, while we are now consolidating at this open price right in here. So a little bit of a Darth Maul candle action, liquidating both longs and shorts that are leveraged. But the CPI came out at 9.1%, up from 8.8%. For those of you who don't know, this is brutal. It's essentially saying that different forms of inflation are not getting better. They're not even staying the same. In fact, they are getting worse. So the consumer price index continues to rise despite the Fed raising rates in a number of different ways, but they're pretty much just raising rates in order to fight inflation, knowing that it will be very hurtful to the economy. However, we've seen a pretty steady increase now for a while, and it doesn't look like these Fed rate hikes are working really at all. I don't even think we're really seeing inflation slow down yet. So maybe we'll slow down as we approach towards that 10% mark. But right now, things are just continuing to get worse despite what the Fed is trying to do. So now they are not stopping inflation, but also hurting the economy. And we're seeing that with NASDAQ being just barely green, about 0.25%. And if we go over to where Bitcoin is on the day, Bitcoin is, I think Bitcoin's green about 1.25%. So about 1% more than NASDAQ, which is to be expected, as Bitcoin is a more volatile asset than NASDAQ is. It also has a lot less in market cap, which makes sense as to why it's more volatile. Now, in addition to this, we've talked about Three Arrows Capital a lot on this channel. If you want to learn more about them, I was just talking about them maybe a video or two ago explaining the whole situation and the domino effect that they have. But a New York judge is now freezing assets of Three Arrows Capital as the firm's founders remain underground. So for those of you who don't know, it looks like the founders of Three Arrow Capital are going off the grid. It looks like they are trying to either flee the country or go off the grid or try to go unknown, but they do not want to be seen in the light right now. Now, they have come out and they have released statements and announcements, but as for publicly showing up to locations and making their presence known in a location, they are trying to hide that for the time being. Again, they lost billions and billions of dollars in capital, and they have seemingly nuked everything. So what's happening in the Bitcoin market is affecting everything else, because this is ultimately a hit to the tech industry that was already getting hit without the Luna and Three Arrows Capital situation. So tech as a whole right now is seeing pretty hard times, and it's not just cryptocurrency. Really, it's everything, but specifically tech as a whole right now is seeing some harder times in comparison to what it has seen in the past. Now, the good news is that Binance is still chugging. Binance has been pretty phenomenal, pretty strong throughout this whole bear market so far, and it was just announced by CoinDesk that more than $400 million in BNB was burned in their quarterly move. So the burns are part of an automatic system to reduce their total supply of BNB to 100 million. This is just a routine burn. It's pretty common, I would say, for different kinds of communities and platforms and tokens to use burns. They've been used for years and years now to reduce the overall amount of supply of different projects, to arguably make them more rare and harder to come by, thus trying to raise the overall value as well. But it's something that a lot of different platforms use. Crow, or Crypto.com, has been an avid user of this as well. And the unique thing here is that it works for some coins and it really doesn't work for others. I think Crypto.com is an example of one that it has pretty much failed to work on. I remember Pundy X back in the day was trying to do something like this as well, and it just didn't really work out for them. BNB, on the other hand, has been able to utilize this burn mechanism to a lot better degree. So it's one of those things where you are what you make it. It works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. The overall idea of it is very useful and very good, because if you are eliminating hundreds of millions of dollars of coins out of existence, erasing them. Imagine if Bitcoin's overall supply went from 21 million to 20 million or 19 million because they were erased, not lost. Those are all still calculated in, but it's saying out of the circulating supply and the active supply, we are eliminating this much out. So, it is a useful thing when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but it's good to see that Binance is still moving strong and they're moving active. So going back to Bitcoin, let's discuss, I guess, the future of Bitcoin. What does this mean for Bitcoin? Is it bullish? Is it bearish? Well, I think arguably the trend is our friend here, and we've said this for a long time. When Bitcoin is rejecting previous resistance and previous support levels, It's not a good thing to see this kind of rejection. Also, as you guys can tell, volume over here is for the most part pretty low. Even on this breakout that we had just the other day, it wasn't looking that great for Bitcoin. So I'm not saying that everything's doom and gloom, but what I am saying is in the short term, it certainly doesn't look like Bitcoin is screaming bullishness. Now, when we're zooming out, as I mentioned earlier, to the weekly and the monthly, that's where we start seeing a lot of the more bullish arguments on these indicators and on these different kinds of oscillators on the larger timescales. We always need to recognize what's happening on the candle chart first, though, because that's where all of these indicators are ultimately taken from. And the one thing that I will leave everyone with that I am seeing as just another little bit of a warning sign, I guess it's really a double-edged sword in this case, is that Bitcoin is now rejecting. We saw a weekly rejection candle after a breakdown through the 200 weekly moving average, which we saw just in the last week of our weekly close. Now, this has never happened, at least that I'm aware of, in Bitcoin's history. I don't think I've ever seen Bitcoin break and reject below this. If we want to move this over to a log and auto chart, then we can see that really every single time Bitcoin has ever fallen below this on a weekly timescale, it has bounced. I mean, it has shown that the bottom is very, very near. So looking at that, we can tell that we bottomed over here. We bottomed in 2014 and 2018 and 2020. However, for the first time really ever, we are now breaking below this zone and seeing a little bit of rejection. Now on the NASDAQ, the same holds true. However, NASDAQ's actually using this as support, and it looks like it's bouncing here, and it wants to hold for the time being. So if NASDAQ sees a form of consistent support here, that could ultimately bring up everything else, because it's one of the largest indices and assets in the entire world. So when we're talking about a very large index that influences everything, NASDAQ's going to be one of them. So if NASDAQ can hold this 200-day weekly moving average, that could just be a glimmer of light for really everything else. So lots of mixed signals in this area. I'm happy to keep everyone in the loop with what's happening. But if you did enjoy this content, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. There are plenty of more videos like this one to keep coming out and keep all of you in the loop. So if you like the news and the TA, make sure you guys stick around. And if you want to get access to all my technical analysis and my information early, consider heading to the link down in the description down below, where you can join a link called Crypt Nation, and it's a really great group. I'm one of the analysts over there, and I'm happy to be a part of it. But without further ado, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in Friday's video.